Welcome, everyone. We'll give it a couple of minutes before we kick things off. Thank you so much for joining. We will start with just a couple of housekeeping items. The session is being recorded, so make sure to check out the link when the follow-up email goes out following the session. You can feel free to ask questions in the chat after the presentation portion of our webinar. You can also raise your hand and you should have the ability to speak, so whichever you prefer. We're so happy you're here. I'll pass things over to Alicia.
All right, thank you, Julia, and good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who have not met me, my name is Alicia Brown, and I'm the director of Georgia Bright here at Capital Good Fund. Been here for about 2 months and was previously at the city of Savannah, so really excited to continue to be involved in the Georgia solar and clean energy space. This is the first public stakeholder meeting for the Georgia Solar for All program, so we're really excited to just give you an update on the program itself, what Solar for All is, what it means for Georgia, and some timelines. But the bulk of this meeting is going to be really for your questions and feedback, as we want this program to work as well as possible for Georgia residents. So we already touched on the agenda a little bit, and as Julia said, definitely ask questions in the chat. And when we get to the questions section, feel free to raise your hand as well. I'm just going to give a brief overview of the Solar for All program and the timeline, most of the time for questions, and then at the last 5 minutes, talk about additional opportunities to get involved and stay up to date that are on the horizon. So the first, just very basic, Solar for All is one of 3 programs under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is operating out of the Environmental Protection Agency and was funded by the Inflation Reduction Act. It's a $7 billion program that made 60 awards to states, territories, tribes, and multi-state coalitions, with the announcements coming out on Earth Day earlier this year. The purpose of the Solar for All program is very specific compared to the other 2 Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund programs. It is solely focused on bringing the benefits of solar to low-income and disadvantaged communities, which I will define for you later because it does have a specific definition. Solar for All, really under the umbrella of serving low-income and disadvantaged communities, has 3 key goals, which are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and other air pollutants, to deliver the benefits of greenhouse gas reducing projects to American communities with a focus on low-income and disadvantaged communities, and to mobilize private capital and other financing to really enhance what the grant dollars are able to do and serve communities that much more. So Georgia received $156 million to be spent statewide over the next 5 years through May of 2029. Our coalition, the Georgia Bright Communities Coalition, is led by Capital Good Fund, which is a U.S. Treasury certified nonprofit community development financial institution. For those of you who don't know what that is, we are a financial institution that's really in a place of serving communities, organizations that aren't well served by mainstream financial institutions. So addressing market failures to serve low-income communities, communities of color. We are in coalition with the City of Atlanta, City of Savannah, and City of Decatur, which many of you know have really ambitious clean energy and equity goals that are really strongly aligned with the Solar for All objectives. And we also had 91 additional partners on our original application, and we are building that coalition each day. I actually know many of the organizations on this stakeholder meeting right now providing a letter of support and want to thank you for that. So the program has some high-level requirements that are really the guardrails for program designs that we put forth and should be the guiding beacon for just how we roll out this program. So the first is that the grant funding can only be used to deploy solar and storage or provide technical assistance for the benefit of low-income and disadvantaged communities. So this isn't a program that's meant to deploy solar for businesses necessarily, or just solar out in a field, like for utility scale purposes, is really meant for low income and disadvantaged communities. It's also not meant for, other energy purposes such as electrification. That's served by other programs. The second is that households must receive net savings or equivalent non-financial benefits that are no less than 20% of the average electricity bill for the utility territory. So we're not playing around with 5% savings, or maybe you get solar and you see a financial return in 10 years. We are talking day one energy savings of 20% or more. And then finally, we have pretty ambitious household serve requirements that we have to meet. We're looking to serve around 16,000 Georgia households through May of 2029. So this is going to take a whole of the state mobilization of groups that are interested in energy equity and good jobs and all the different objectives that intersect with solar and energy equity. So who are low income and disadvantaged communities? We have 3 definitions that we can play with here in this program. The first is you can qualify on your income, which makes sense. And that qualification is the greater of 80% of the area median income or 200% of the federal poverty level. We can direct you to where to find that information that is adjusted on a household size basis and on a county basis. So for example, the cost of living is higher in Fulton County than it would in, say, Bartow County. And a household of 5 gets more than a household of 1. The second qualification track is based on your census tract. Some communities are identified as disadvantaged by the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. And that's not only looking at income, but also looking at factors like exposure to pollution, unemployment, and a variety of other factors that can make a community have deeper challenges that they're having to overcome. So if an individual is in that census tract, they are good to go. No additional qualification is needed. And then finally, affordable housing properties are eligible, and those can be naturally occurring or they can be subsidized. But the requirement is that they have to be affordable at 80% AMI, and affordable being that tenants are spending no more than 30% of their income. There's a lot of math in that, but I think we know generally like low-income housing tax credit properties and others that have affordability covenants are going to qualify under that category, and some naturally occurring will qualify as well. So what we have proposed to the EPA, the goal of Solar for All is to reach as many low-income and disadvantaged households as possible, regardless of the barriers that they face. So we're trying to serve households that can have rooftop systems or that cannot due to shading or repair issues. So we have 4 different programs so that we can serve as many of those cases as possible. So the first, as many of you know, we've been running a pilot solar leasing program for low-income households. So we will be continuing the Georgia Bright Lease program. So with this model, participants receive solar panels at no upfront cost and enjoy day one energy savings. In this case, it's going to be 20% or more energy savings day one. We include all maintenance, and if individuals wish to own the panels, there is an opportunity to buy those out beginning in year 7 so that you can have ownership. But what's nice about this program is that the burden of maintenance does not fall to the household. So if an inverter needs to be replaced or if the system has a battery, which we'll talk about more in a minute, that responsibility would be on Good Fund. So there's no surprise cost at any point in the process. The second, we're going to have a free direct install program, which is exclusively for low-income households. So this one is not going to be offered to households making, say, 120% AMI in a disadvantaged census tract. It's going to be focused in on low-income households, and it's a completely free solar program. We are structuring it as a prepaid lease so that maintenance, again, remains the responsibility of Good Fund, but there's no upfront cost and there's no ongoing payments. It again is a free program. Now we know it's going to be super popular, so we will be assigning those slots based on lottery. More of those details are to come and are being worked out by our really awesome community advisory board. Many of the members are on this call. So those details will be released more as they get finalized. But this is really trying to serve the extremely low income households that have such great energy burdens that they really can't afford to make any payments on solar, even if they're getting net savings. The third model is our really novel proposal that recognizes that Georgia doesn't have third-party community solar legislation. So this program is called Community Benefit Solar, and what it does is it works with community-based organizations and businesses to install solar projects on those properties, either like a church property, a shelter, nonprofit food bank, or even like a large warehouse to install a solar project at a low cost and share 80% of the net financial savings with surrounding households via a community benefits agreement. So what this would be is like, let's say we put it on a large warehouse and they save $10,000 a month on energy, just throwing out a really random number. 8,000 of those dollars would go right back to eligible households to reduce their energy bills 20% or more per month. So what this does is takes advantage of already disturbed real estate in communities and puts those sites to use for the benefit of households who may not be able to host solar themselves. And then finally, the other pathway to community solar in the state of Georgia is to partner with our utilities. So we are currently in conversations with all three utility types in the state to see what support they would need to have additional community solar projects that offer 20% bill savings to households. So those conversations are also evolving, but what this would be is we offer a discounted financial product or a partial grant, and they administer customer enrollment and offer those 20% bill savings, and also make sure that we're siting the projects on the most advantageous locations on the grid. Together, these programs are going to serve about 16,000 households, though we could potentially do even more depending on just how things go with interest rates and other factors that are not always the easiest to predict 5 years out. Some other awesome features of this program is there's actually funding for enabling repairs. We know some low-income households have roofs that aren't in good shape for solar or need electrical upgrades, or maybe they need some tree trimming or some rafters to get strengthened. We have approximately $20 million to do that work. Like the free solar program, this is going to be reserved primarily for the households that need it most first, those low-income households. But our advisory board is currently working through the specific criteria to make sure that we get the perfect balance, or as close to the perfect balance, of serving the households that need it most while also deploying as much solar to needy families as possible. There's also funding for technical assistance because there are non-financial barriers to solar that need to be worked out, like making sure we have enough workers who are qualified, making sure we do the community engagement and education, addressing permitting interconnection barriers, and those community benefit agreements that are going to be so necessary for the community benefit solar program. Having someone who has experience come in and help make sure that benefits really do flow to communities and we have the accountability that's necessary for public trust. And then finally, with all of our programs, there is an option to have battery storage to provide resilience to communities. Because I'm in Savannah, we already know that the Hurricane Helene is coming our way, and we want to make sure that homeowners, especially those who have medical dependence on electricity or other reasons that electricity is extra important to them, have that resilience against power outages. So timeline. I told you already that we got our award announcement in April. We have since launched a community advisory board to do some final revisions to the initial application that we had submitted, as we did receive a smaller award than we had originally asked for and had to make some changes based on that. So that first work plan revision is due in October, which is just right around the corner. And then that'll allow us to launch our first round of programs early next year. So that's going to be our two residential programs, the Bright Lease and the Bright Prepaid Lease or free solar program, as well as enabling repairs and some of our technical assistance programs. The balance of our more commercial scale, community scale programs will launch around June of next year. And that's just a reflection of the fact that those programs need a little bit more planning to make sure that we do them right. So we don't want to rush out programs that aren't workable for participants, installers, project hosts. So those next round programs, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Those are due in June of 2025 and will roll out in Q3 2025. And all of this will run through May of 2029, at which point the performance period ends. But importantly, because many of these programs revolve funds, we hope that the impact will persist long after May of 2029. So with that, I've seen a lot of questions coming through in the chat and would love to answer some of them.
Yes, I can read them aloud for you. We have one that says, how can it save money if some rates in Georgia are less than 12 cents? And how can you save without one-on-one net metering, one-to-one?
That is a great question. So luckily, because of our pilot program, we have experience offering solar programs that don't require net metering. So there's a few things that we do. The first is the Solar for All grant dollars can basically serve as 0% debt. So we're able to do systems without taking on market interest rates. So that's one way we subsidize it. Another is we've got the tax credits, which since we're a nonprofit, we can actually access not only the tax credit for families who might not have the tax appetite to take those tax credits, but we can also take adders that are available, like for families in energy communities. They get some extra support because of the loss of certain jobs and investments in those communities. There's also adders for domestic content that we think will become important over time, especially as Q-Cells and other companies continue to move manufacturing to the US. We are also able to monetize renewable energy credits, which is basically a financial instrument that values the cleanness of solar energy relative to just other electrons you get from the grid. So all of those things come together to allow us to offer systems at low cost, and that can allow for day one savings if the systems are sized well, which our installers are trained and know what they're doing and are able to size those systems appropriately.
Excellent. Mike asks, any relief from Georgia Power on the current tariffs?
Any relief from Georgia Power?
Yes.
You know, we understand that a IRP is coming up in 2025 and we are tracking that. But for now, no, we will be operating under the renewable, non-renewable tariff that has been in place for more than a decade.
Great. Benjamin asks, would rural areas and farms be eligible?
Yes, actually, that's something that's really important. Just because our coalition members are in urban areas does not mean that this is not a statewide program. Our desire is to reach every corner of the state, and in particular, rural areas that have challenges like paying energy bills and accessing some of the opportunities that are coming to other parts of the state. We want to bring the jobs portion of Solar for All everywhere and the energy savings portion.
Excellent. Scott asks, are you concerned that you have access to enough trained people to do the energy audits and assessments?
So one way that we are addressing the workforce, because that's something we're going to need, is a big solar workforce across the state and the workforce for the enabling repairs and the other portions of the program. We're going to provide, I think we've currently budgeted $3 million for workforce training, and we're going to be putting out a procurement later this year for companies and nonprofits and universities, technical colleges, unions that want to get involved in the workforce training to make sure that we have enough workers to meet this moment.
Excellent. Julian asked, are Justice 40 areas labeled by the federal climate tool within Georgia prioritized?
Yes, so for outreach, we are definitely going to focus on Justice 40 areas, persistent poverty counties, the areas that need it most. And we're going to be relying on the community organizations in this coalition and that we subsequently build relationships with after we do additional outreach to make sure that we're speaking to the communities that have the greatest need and that they're aware and able to participate.
Awesome. Brittany asked, how will consumers or community orgs supporting them identify the qualified solar installers for this program?
That is a great question. We've actually already seen some bad actors in several states say, oh, the Solar for All program is operating and we're a part of it, get free panels. None of the Solar for All programs in any of the 50 states are operating right now. So we are really thinking deeply about how we can make sure that households know who is with us. So something we're going to be doing is once we go through a procurement and vet our installers, we're going to have them on our website as approved Georgia Bright installers and have a contact number that we're going to ask people to call if they have concerns about who's with our program. We'll also be relying on our community partners to be trusted sources of information for the community. So, the city of Atlanta and Savannah and Decatur are coalition members, and they will be, sources of information for who's with us and who's not. And same with the community organizations that work with us.
Absolutely. Russ asks, can you share what the project development process will look like and the timeline?
I may ask Russ to come off mute and explain a little more about what he means with project development timeline.
If you raise your hand, Russ, we should be able to get you off mute. Oh, it looks like oh, here we go.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. Yeah, just trying to understand as far as developing these projects, what that's going to look like. Obviously, you're going to need, preliminary design work and then detailed design and everything that goes along with that. Just trying to understand what that process is going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the rooftop projects, the process is going to be that we have an intake process for interested households where they would share their address, they would share a utility bill if they have access to it, or like a waiver so we could get the energy data directly from the utility. And there will be, our installers will do an initial analysis and design proposal. And then we would price that for them, like price a lease, or in the case of a prepaid lease, it would be zero cost. But then at that point, the household would decide whether they want to move forward. And then there would be the detailed design work of understanding the electrical system and applying for interconnection, pulling permits, all of that kind of work.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure. So you're going to be relying on the citizens to reach out and say, hey, we'd like to look at solar at our home or these, apartment complex or what have you?
I don't want to say we'll be relying on that because we're going to be going out to them. We've got a community engagement plan that includes making subawards to community organizations, having staff out in the field across different regions of the state, mobilizing additional community groups through our solar education and outreach partner program that we used during our pilot. So we're going to be doing a lot of proactive outreach, but when it comes to making the step of getting in the funnel, if you will, that will be either a form filled out directly by the customer, or if one of our EPCs filled it out for them, or a community organization filled it out for them. We are going to need a central landing place for individuals who want to participate.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the community option as far as community solar, so to speak. Identifying possible areas like warehouse roofing areas and what those could do on the development end. That's kind of where my mind's going with that.
Yeah, in that case, it could be either the potential project host, or if one of our approved EPCs wants to submit a project, that would also be an avenue.
Got it. And you've already got a listing of approved EPCs or working on that?
We do not. So for federal funds, you have to do a formal competitive procurement. And especially since the community scale programs aren't being launched until next summer, that procurement will probably come in the winter or spring of 2025. Residential procurement will probably happen later this year or early 2025.
Okay. And can you say how this ties in with the Solar for All advisory services RFP that was recently came out and proposal submitted?
So that RFP was for compliance services. These grants have a lot of requirements on them that we have to follow, including Davis-Bacon, BABA, semi-annual reporting, and we were bringing in someone to make sure that we and our subrecipients are prepared to comply.
Got it. All kind of tied together then.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple more hands raised. So Ruth, if you want to come off mute. We'll give Mike.
Hi, thank you. So with regard to the residential side of it, just trying to really drill down on the mechanics here. You need to be approved as an approved EPC first, qualified under the program, and then so what does that timeline look like, and what is the registration mechanics? And then after you're approved, you can then offer directly to the you can offer directly to potential customers. And is that qualification or that intake process going to be real time? Is it going to be, a day? Is it going to be 5 to 10, 15 to 30? One of the challenges we've run into in other grant markets is, with months of lag in some cases between, registration and approval, and then installation and benefit. It's challenging to maintain an engagement force from a sales and development standpoint because of the lag time, right? So someone's got to invest that money and or take that risk. What does that look like from your side?
So I'll start with the first question. So for the residential program, we are going to put out a formal competitive procurement either later this year or early next, depending on how quickly the EPA moves to approve our revised work plan. And at that point, we will select installers based on a variety of qualifications, like making sure that you have proper insurance, having an electrical contractor that you work with, financial stability, technical qualifications, good background, like in terms of reviews. Once you have been approved, we will do onboarding about our intake process. So from the time that a household puts in an interest form, and the installer, in our pilot program, we assign an installer. If you were generating your own lead as an installer, you would then submit a proposal to us, and we would price it usually in a matter of just a couple days. And then at that point, you would take that back to the customer, the offer that we make in terms of a lease payment, and they would make a decision to either move forward or not, enter an application into our system, and the whole process of originating, underwriting that arrangement, it's usually pretty quick, within probably a couple weeks or less.
Okay, if I may have a follow-up. So one of the more evolving processes that is federally compliant and jurisdictional compliant, that is different from the bid, rebid, lowest bidder competition, is the IPD program. Is there any possibility that you would be interested in going through an IPD process to select the best candidates, not necessarily based on the price, because it is a moving target, and especially if you're going to bring the additional benefits of domestic content, it's that's a bit of a moving target as domestic content rules change, opinions change, etc. So is that possible that you would be able to do that, or you're pretty much stuck in the bid model?
I don't know actually what IPD stands for, so it'd be helpful if you defined that, but we're not just going with the lowest bid. Like we are looking at qualifications and installers who are mission aligned, committed to consumer protection, committed to the social goals of the program, including hiring workforce trainees and really living out the goals of the Solar for All program.
Yeah, so IPD just stands for Integrated Project Delivery, and what it allows for is the defining of a project team at project initiation and pre-project work, which this would include, so that instead of adding costs in the bid model where there's a cost to bidding for projects, and IPD establishes an owner's maximum cost. This is a little bit of a unique animal. But it's it's approved by AIA. There are contract forms and documents, much like the bid models. So it's a similar model. It's been used by a lot of municipalities and other government entities, as a way to reduce costs, provide a higher value, so that we can be more of a team player, and in helping to provide the best solution, not a defending of the scope of work and what was bid for the lowest possible price. It's a team model versus an adversarial model.
I am going to table this conversation to, we're going to have an installers focus group that will get a little bit more in those technical details and work out things like what the procurement process will look like, workflows, requirements. So let's save that conversation for then, and we'll share more information about that focus group at the end of this conversation.
Great, sounds good. We'd love to participate, and procurement is a big question. So are you conceiving that the bank, your team might be the procurer of these? So we would just be the installers, or the EPCs would just be the suppliers of design services and labor, which kind of minimizes our value somewhat?
We conceive of the EPCs as doing design, material procurement, permits, interconnection, install.
Okay, great. So it would be a discussion of the approved products for the procurement, but the EPC would still be responsible for that.
That's correct.
Got it. Thank you for your indulgence.
Oops.
Excellent. Our next hand raised is for Lawrence.
Thank you. And forgive me if I might have missed this, but you did mention 20 million in enabling repairs, right? To include weatherization upgrades, correct?
Yes.
And will all solar lease deals on the residential side require home energy assessments?
That is an outstanding question that the advisory board is working through. If we did an energy assessment for every home, that would come out to around $2 million of our 20 million for enabling repairs. So that would come at the expense of doing roof work, tree removal, tree trimming, electrical upgrades for those homes. So it's really a value judgment, and it's something that we haven't made a decision on yet, but there are other funding sources available for energy efficiency. And I think the EPA's preference, as it's been expressed to us, is for us to do less energy efficiency and energy auditing and more solar with the program, but it's a little bit TBD.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Our next hand raise is from Don.
Hey, this is Don Moreland from the Georgia Solar Energy Association. My question was along the lines of what the procurement of installers that Mike raised earlier. So I'll save my questions, for when we get to that part of it. A lot of our members have just kind of questioning, or not questioning, but wondering whether it's a kind of a competitive bid procurement model or like some kind of a vetted and approved model, and kind of concerns about a one-time procurement at the beginning of the program if it's a competitive bid process. then does that exclude folks from participating, you know, in year 2, 3, 4, or 5, or et cetera? So that's along the lines of the questions that we had.
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I don't want to give the impression that we're going to do a procurement and pick like the 7 lowest bids. Like that's not what we're going to be looking at. It is more of a RFQ kind of process, really looking for qualified installers who understand that Georgia doesn't have net metering, for example, and that have really good customer interactions and aren't going to cause consumer protection issues, who are committed to the goals of the program in terms of those hiring workforce trainees, things like that. We have not yet decided if there might be a chance to do a second or third round of procurement. So that'll be something we discuss in the installers focus group, if that would be of interest and what that would look like. The only reason we have to do a procurement, the reason I'm saying that word is because it is a federal grant and we can't just pick installers. Like we would have to be able to defend why we chose them and have that documentation for the EPA's review.
Excellent. Well, we'll jump back into the chat function for a couple more questions.
Okay.
The next question is there funding so that the owner of the property is not saddled with a long payoff time and receives greater benefit?
So for the free solar program, those individuals will be receiving a completely free system and will have, you know, maximum possible savings. So that's for those lowest income households. For homeowners receiving a lease, we are doing a lease model so that we can take the tax credits and serve more households. And each of those participants will receive 20% or more day one energy savings. So it's not like you're going to be sitting around waiting for your investment to be recovered. You will be cash flow positive from the very first day. There are cases where households can save more than 20%. So for example, if you are in an energy community, we expect you to save more, but everyone will be saving 20% day one, regardless of what program they participate in.
Good question. Ruth asked, what are the goals for DEI, making sure that racial makeup of the communities served matches the installers? Is there a goal for urban and rural allocations?
So great question on DEI. So the answer is EPA has explicitly told us that we cannot do any kind of quota, favoritism, targeting on the basis of race or gender. Now, in practice, we are going to be trying to reach as diverse of a group of contractors and citizens participants as possible. We will do that through just making sure that we engage as many communities as possible and that we focus our attention on areas that are in the greatest need. So the answer is we're paying attention to it. We just can't say we're paying attention to it. The second question about urban versus rural allocations, we have not explicitly focused on this amount of funding goes to urban, this amount goes to rural, but we are spreading our community engagement investments around the state. And we think that's going to make sure that we get a sufficient number of rural participation and awareness. And that's actually going to be something that's a focus for some of our community engagement subawards, is the best ways to reach rural communities and make sure they're as aware as urban communities. I hope I didn't miss a third part of that question.
No, you got it covered. Thank you for that question, Ruth. Our next question is, since many in low-income communities are renters, how will this benefit the renter, especially if the property owner wants to be the benefactor per se? Just how will this work?
Yeah, great question. So one of the awesome parts about Solar for All is we are able to serve renters for the first time. So for the single family lease and the free solar program, we will allow renters in single family properties to participate with a landlord's permission. Unfortunately, there's not really a way to get around having the landlord's permission, but what that would look like would be probably some kind of solar access addendum on the lease that would ensure that the financial benefit of the solar goes to the tenant as the payer of the energy bill. So it would just be something that is included in the lease of the property. For multifamily housing, we have models that are going to work for both master metered and individually metered properties. For individually metered, we would potentially be able to do a series of small solar projects on the roof connected to the individual meter. For master meter, we would probably have to provide a non-financial benefit that's equivalent to 20% financial savings to deliver benefits to an individual household since they don't pay an individual utility bill. That it gets really complicated depending on how the utilities are set up, and we're going to have to do that on a case-by-case basis for each interested multifamily property. But we're going to be engaging affordable housing providers and landlords across the state, and also encouraging interested residents to have conversations with their landlords to make sure that those benefits have to go to the tenants. Like that is a solar for all requirement. So we're going to be looking for groups that, you know, understand that and are comfortable delivering those benefits to the tenants. For those landlords who are not, we're going to be looking at utility-led community solar or community benefit solar as a way to serve tenants without having something on site at their property.
Very exciting indeed. We have Trey raised his hand, so I will.
Okay, I accidentally clicked that and then lowered it, but I did have a question, so thanks. I know at one time they were considering some low interest loans for multifamily housing that wanted to install their own solar for the tenants, and it looks like that maybe is not part of the program any longer, and just wanted to try and get a little bit more clarity around the multifamily program that I'm moving forward with.
Oh, absolutely. So we actually, multifamily in Georgia is very complicated because there's the question of, is it individually metered or is it master metered? Who pays the utility bill? You know, questions of how you would set up a system so that it could provide a direct benefit to the tenants. So the answer is yes, it's still there, but each property is going to be case by case. So it may be if it's individually metered, we take the approach of having 10 3-kilowatt systems on the roof instead of 30 kilowatts. And each household has an individual lease for their small system. Or if it's master metered, we may have to find a mechanism for transferring the financial benefits that would be going to that master meter to those individual households through the community benefit solar program. So depending on how things are set up for that individual apartment in terms of those payments and that metering, we would work out an arrangement. For community benefit solar, there's 2 financial products we're offering, a low interest loan and a subsidized SEPA. So that option is still there. We would just need to make sure it works with the property in question.
Okay, thanks, Alicia.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Trey. Our next question is, what is the anticipated timeline for opening the application window for installers to qualify as a vetted installer?
So we're going to do 2 rounds. The first will be for the residential installers and targeting the end of this year, beginning of next, probably end of this year. And then for our commercial scale installers, that's going to happen probably next spring, maybe next winter, like January, February timeframe. A lot of this depends on when the EPA approves our work plan revisions.
Excellent. And the second part of that question was related to how you can subscribe to sign up for news as the program develops. We have a newsletter that goes out, so we'll be sure to drop that link in the chat momentarily. Yes,
and then after about 10 more minutes of questions, we do have some next steps for you and how to stay involved and have some information there about how to stay plugged in.
Yes, a couple more questions. As an educational institution and a church, does this project work for these entities, or at best we become advocates?
No, so we actually have created a pathway for educational institutions and churches to be involved, and that's through the Community Benefit Solar Program. So you would get, for your institution or organization, a low-cost solar product. So either a low-interest loan or a subsidized SEPA, which is a power purchase agreement, basically. And it would be behind the meter. So it would be reducing your facility's energy use. Now, what we are asking is, because Solar for All is focused on serving households, that for 5 years, 80% of those net financial benefits go to households through a community benefit agreement. After that time, the benefit sharing can continue, but it doesn't have to. It can be reinvested in your organizational mission. At that point, it's up to you how you want to use it. But that's the model for churches and universities to participate in. Though we hope you'll also do advocacy and workforce training as well.
Absolutely. Alicia, do you want to jump into the next section, or should we continue to take questions?
I can do that, and then we can see if any other questions arise. So, getting involved and staying up to date, as I mentioned in response to one of the questions, we are planning to have a focus group for our residential solar EPCs and installers. I say residential just because those programs are rolling out first. So we're going to have that focus group first. There will be one for commercial as well at a later date. But we're going to have a focus group for those solar installers and EPCs to discuss procurement workflows, equipment, design software, design standards. So we're actually going to be sending you a poll question after this meeting has concluded to understand when's the best time to hold that meeting, but just be on the lookout for that. We're also going to, we have not selected a date yet, but soon we will be having a strategic planning meeting for CBO partners and how the community engagement around Solar for All is going to look, and how to make sure that we reach the entire state and reach the communities that need it most. So to get information on when these are scheduled, we have an interest form on our website, georgiabright.org. There's a Solar for All page. We ask that even if you're receiving emails from me currently, please fill out that form so I don't have to cobble together a list every time. I'd like to have one in one place so that we can make sure I don't forget anyone. Also, we are about to have standalone Solar for All socials, but in the meantime, we are releasing information on our Capital Good Fund social media. So give us a like, follow, or whatever you do on X. And share this information widely. Some people couldn't make it to this meeting, but this is a huge investment in Georgia, and it touches a lot of different organizations, even those that don't think of themselves as involved in the solar industry. If you care about saving money or good jobs or health, there's a role in here for you. So please share this information widely.
Excellent. I just dropped some links in the chat as well that should support everything we should just talked through. We have one more question about still curious if the program works for churches and religious institutions, etc. And I believe, Alicia, you touched on that, but
yes,
if you wanted to, the answer is yes. You can get involved.
The answer is yes, and I know this has been a lot of information, so we are happy to speak further about specific projects if you are a member of a church and would like to speak about a project. And the other thing that I will flag is, if you have been listening to the Solar for All presentation and have a project that may not be a good fit, if you are a resident and don't think you'll meet the income or census tract qualification, or if you are a nonprofit organization, we do have our pilot programs that are running through mid-October that still have a little bit of space in them. If you're not sure, again, just put in an inquiry and we'll talk about your project details and see where it fits best.
Absolutely. We can dive into a couple more questions with the last 10 minutes. Chris asked, do the cost of leases increase over time? Did the bill savings dip below 20% at any point?
So the answer, we do have a small escalator for inflation that is 2.9%. And then do the savings dip below 20%? That's really hard to promise. And I'll tell you why. I mean, one is just utilities change their rate structures frequently. And in some cases, we have seen efforts to change rate structures specifically to disadvantage solar. So we can't promise anything, but we will be specifically, fighting to keep solar compensation the way it is. And many advocates on this call will be as well. The other thing is we can't guarantee that homeowners won't like that they're starting to get discounted energy and use more energy. That's something that we've seen with energy efficiency is when energy gets cheaper, you use more of it. And then the other way that we can't just guarantee it is, world's getting hotter and we're using a lot more energy as a result of that. But the structure is if your energy use stays the same and rates stay more or less the way they have been and increasing at the rate they have, then yes, you'll save for 20% for the whole term.
Excellent. Next question. What role is the Community Advisory Board playing in the design and rollout of the programs? Who is on the board?
Great question. So we have 40 people on the board and they represent everyone from just interested residents to community-based organizations, local governments, solar industry, financiers. We've got a really good advisory board. They're playing a role in making some of the value judgments that I've mentioned on this call, like who receives the free solar and what's the process for making decisions about that. What are the criteria around the enabling repairs program, since we know there's so much need for pre-solar home improvement work. Making decisions about what the community engagement process looks like, and also helping us anticipate unintended consequences and helping advise us on how we reach groups that are harder to reach. Like, for example, households that don't speak English as a first language. So a lot of roles.
Exciting indeed. We have one hand raised from Reverend Leslie White.
Okay.
There you go. Can you hear me?
I can.
My question was just some clarity. You named a pathway for churches and educational institutions. I just didn't catch it. So that's why I raised my hand again.
Oh, no worries. So it's under the Community Benefit Solar Program, which is the third one on this slide that you see here. So this is how churches and schools and other institutions can get involved. They can basically be community solar project hosts and have a project at their facility. It would be funded through a discounted financial product, so a very low interest loan or a low interest power purchase agreement if you wanted maintenance to be our responsibility. And what the requirement for that would be is we ask that you share 80% of the net financial benefits with eligible households for 5 years. And that's to satisfy EPA's requirement that all Solar for All dollars go to eligible households. But then for the remaining 20 plus years that the system operates, it is yours to use the savings as you see fit. But we hope that, as a church, like you've got congregants that you can help, or, people surrounding the church that you want to minister to. We hope it's a relatively easy requirement to satisfy, and we'll have technical assistance to help do that so it's not a burden on the project host.
So to get to this project website, how do I access it? Or do I just put in that name and it'll come up?
So we haven't opened the project portal for this yet to be taking inquiries because the program won't launch until next year. But if you want more information at any point, georgiabright.org is our website. And under the Georgia Bright tab, there is a Solar for All page where you can get plugged in with all the updates.
I'm on that. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for this time.
Thank you.
Excellent. One more question. What will the process look like for employers like DEW to be a part of the installation process?
Absolutely. So is this for installers to get involved in the process?
Yes, it says employers to be a part of the installation process.
So to get involved in the installation process, we're going to be doing a procurement and qualifying installers to be involved in the program, and that will come out for residential later this year and for commercial next year. Now, to the question about workforce training, like if you want to be an employer for workforce trainees, we're going to be looking for all of the installers who participate in this program to hire first from our workforce training graduates so that we can make sure that anyone that we train has a pathway to a good job serving the communities they come from. And then we're also going to be looking for installers who might not be involved in the program, like for whatever reason. Maybe they're more utility scale, for example, or maybe they're more involved on the O&M side and would be involved with us at a later stage in the process. We would still be looking for them to just know about trainees and hopefully hire from them.
Absolutely. Mike asked, has that pass-through been blessed by Georgia Power and or the PUC, the pass-through for nonprofits to pass through on the benefits?
I am not an attorney, so I will start with that. But we do not think that there would need to be a blessing from Georgia Power or the PSC other than interconnecting the system, because at its core, this would just be no different than a church having a behind-the-meter solar project, interconnecting it, and taking service under the R&R tariff. The community benefit agreement would not be direct on the Georgia Power bill unless that's what the church wanted to do. And in that case, we would like to have that discussion with Georgia Power, because that would be a really good way to tie the solar to energy savings. But a community benefit agreement is just sharing a benefit as a side agreement. So it could be anything like writing a check, or it could be providing food from a food pantry, or if the church has childcare, discounting the childcare an appropriate amount. It's really an infinitely customizable solution, and it's one that doesn't require any regulatory approvals.
Got it. And similarly, Adam has a question springboarding off of Reverend White's question. Do those community benefits passed through to the community specifically have to offset community members' energy bills?
They do not. So it could be just, like I said, a check every month for the 5-year period of the community benefit program. Or it could be some kind of service with an equivalent financial value, or it could be a bill credit. There's so many options here. And that's what we like about this program, because communities can be served in the way that makes the most sense for them, or project hosts can deliver a benefit that they are uniquely equipped to provide. And like I give the example, if it's multifamily housing, maybe it's a rent discount. That's something that's relatively easy for them to provide if the solar savings are, offsetting it.
Excellent. Well, with just 2 minutes left, again, please take a look at the chat for relevant links. And if there are any other remaining questions, feel free to drop them in. Otherwise, we thank you so much for your time, and we'll be sure to follow up with all of the relevant information in the emails as well.
Thank you everyone again for coming.
Thank you.